Okay, very good afternoon to all our viewers from India, and a very good day to those of you who are maybe joining us from Europe. My name is Samrat. I am working for EURAXESS, and we are very proud to bring you another exciting webinar in cooperation with Taylor and Francis. This is part of our year-long publishing series. I think this is our fourth webinar already. We have been organizing together with Taylor and Francis, and today I'm very happy that we will have a topic which is relevant to researchers who are interested to get published in peer-reviewed journals, and with a particular focus on for researchers in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. Now, it gives me an immense pleasure also to welcome our today's speaker, Dr. Erato Basea. She's joining us from Germany. Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Yeah. Nice to have you with us. Let me just briefly introduce to you our speaker. Erato has worked on Routledge Art and Design Journal since 2017 and Routledge Sociology Journal since 2018. She comes to this role with years of experience in academic publishing, having been an author of academic work herself, and she has also, been a researcher. She has been a postdoc, a researcher at Columbia University. She has also taught courses in the US and other places. And she holds a master's degree and a doctoral in film cultural studies. And now she's going to tell us today, giving you really first-hand insight into the publishing reality. She's working for one of the largest publishing houses in the world. And she will also give you a clear understanding, what is needed to get published, and also, especially for those who are from the arts, social sciences, and humanities, she will give you a really good overview about the publishing landscape in those fields. So with no further delay, Erato, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Samrat. After this fantastic, wonderful introduction, well, what can I say? I have, big expectations great expectations to meet, right? Thank you so much for that. I'm really excited to be here. It's the second webinar I'm giving to EURAXESS audience. I think the last one was last August. Now it is autumn in Germany, and I'm really, really excited to be here and talk to you about something really, really close to my heart. As you can see, arts, humanities, social sciences is at the heart of who I am and what I do every day in my life. So plug in, get yourself a soothing beverage, and we will dig in all about publishing. And here is what I'm going to talk to you about today. I will share my experiences, tips, and advice on how to write a great journal article. And I will also highlight some ethical issues that we should all be mindful of. And I will pause for a couple of minutes to take questions. And of course, you are really welcome to type your questions in the Q&A box here. After the first Q&A session, we will talk about things to consider when choosing where to publish your work. And then I will try to demystify what the peer review process is. And it's interesting because then I can actually share my experience the experience I had with peer review when I was a first-time author, and now that I work for actually a publisher. And we can actually then close the session with a final Q&A session. Okay, this is in a nutshell what I'm going to cover today. First and foremost, then, the first section will be on things to consider when writing a journal article. So when you think about a journal article, what do you think? Like, is it only in written form? Of course, we all work in the arts, humanities, and social sciences disciplines. So what is a journal article for you? If you ask me, since I worked on film, cinema and film studies, a journal article has many, in fact, forms. And here I have included three screenshots, three pictures of an article type, of three actually different article types that you can find published on our website. The first one is a visual essay published in the Journal of Media Practice back in 2009. And if you visit our website and find this essay, you will see it consists of images of Villa Grimaldi in Chile. And it is a visual essay. You can also find poems, for example, which is again a different article type, we can say. And this is a poem published in the journal Wasafiri. But we have also published visual essays, which is perhaps more relevant to the research I used to do. And in fact, if you Google the title of this visual essay, you will see that you can actually publish videos on publishers' websites as well, at least on our website. Having said that, of course, there are other forms of article types, but today I will focus specifically on research articles, on articles that are based on, written form. And here I have actually taken the liberty to share two screenshots. The first screenshot is actually the first page of my PhD thesis, which I submitted to the University of Oxford, well, a long time ago, I have to say. It makes me feel old. And a screenshot of the first article I ever published in a journal, which is actually based on a chapter of my PhD thesis. And the article is on a film. I don't know if you have seen it, Zorba the Greek, with Anthony Quinn, which was released back in the 60s. And here I have included, some things for us to consider when thinking about, okay, what if I compare my PhD thesis to a journal article? What are the similarities and what are the differences? Okay, thinking about my PhD thesis, it was a thesis that was submitted to the University of Oxford. It was actually, I have to say, an extensive form of academic writing. It had over 300 or 400 pages. And of course, on all these pages, the argument develops across various sections, in fact, 5 chapters. It was read by my former supervisor, my 2 examiners, and in fact some peers I contacted who actually read the thesis before I submitted it and gave me feedback. And before I, finally submitted it, my external examiners and my supervisor, in fact, provided corrections. Now thinking about my first article, what was the experience? How can I compare it to my thesis? It was published in a journal in European cinemas. It was a shorter form of academic writing. It had about 15 pages, and the introduction was on 1 page rather than on a, on a big, like 5 or 6 pages. The argument I had developed across a few sections. There was actually an opening page with article metadata and metrics, and this page was added by the publisher. The article hopefully was read by a much wider audience and not just by my supervisor and my examiners. And again, I had the benefit of getting corrections and edits and feedback from readers, who in that case was the journal peer reviewers and the journal editor. So the point I'm trying to make here is that we should make a distinction between these 2 forms of writing. And one of the main reasons articles might be rejected is that peer reviewers and editors determine that it is not that what you have submitted is not a true journal article. It could be that what has been submitted to the journal is more similar actually to a condensed thesis or a book chapter. So covering too many different points, it might be that what you have submitted is unfocused or lacking the structure of a journal article. Or it might be the case that what you have submitted is too journalistic, more of an example of public scholarship. Basically, the piece of writing is not a journal research article in terms of either structure or language or possible both. Okay, so before we start writing a journal article, what are the things to consider? We're actually going to begin with a crucial step in the research and publishing process, understanding what we are doing, why, and who we would like to communicate with. Making clear decisions and smart strategies at this point will significantly improve our chances of being published in an international journal. It all starts, of course, with choosing a topic that will be relevant to the international community, not just to your supervisor, perhaps, or the two external examiners, of course. This means keeping up to date with the current literature, what key scholars are working on, and here social media and list servers can help, and of course attending conferences as much as possible. Because in this way, you expose yourself to other researchers' work and you really, you broaden your horizons, right? So when choosing a topic and deciding upon case studies and data sets, it's perfectly fine for you to work with local or regional examples, but it is also important to show why these examples or data might be of interest to an international audience. So you could consider a comparative study or engaging with and developing further a well-established models or theories, right? Um, so another of the challenges authors have is communicating the research findings in a manner that is accessible and in line with how most researchers in their field present their research. I would also advise you to take some time to determine your objectives. Sometimes your work will be written for specialists in your field, and you might also choose to engage in public scholarship, and write for a general public. It's also important to understand what is expected of you, what the particular requirements are in your current position. For instance, if I were you, I would ask myself, are you required to publish research articles? Or is the expectation that you will write a book first? Probably you will turn your PhD thesis into a book and then turn various chapters into articles in the coming years. Is there the expectation that you will collaborate with your advisor and be a co-author? And if so, what does that mean? Once you have determined your objectives and understand what is required of you, then you can begin considering where to publish. And when you begin investigating the appropriate place to publish, remember you are joining an ongoing conversation in your field and make sure you are contributing thoughtfully to this conversation. Okay, and here are some basic tips for you to help make your argument easy to read and understand. I have actually highlighted the first bullet point, which is write first, edit later. And this is actually the advice my former supervisor gave me when I was in the first year of my PhD. And I was sort of like lost. I was reading, of course, a lot. I didn't know what I'm gonna say. I have no idea about my argument or the films I would choose to analyze. And then I was just like writing. I had all of my ideas in various drafts in various Word files in my laptop, and I think that the same actually can be relevant to a journal article. So my advice to you again would be write first and then turn back again to what you have written and edited. Simplicity is key, of course, especially when you are dealing with complex problems or theories, especially when you write about theories that have a lot of, jargon and terminology that might not be accessible to a wider public. And the other thing I should say, which I have to admit I'm a culprit, I used to make this mistake over and over again, is to say that keep your sentences relatively short. I usually recommend 2 or 2.5 lines on a page. In the past, actually, I used to develop my thoughts in over like 5 or 6 lines. So sentences were too long and readers actually would get lost in all that. So I had actually to edit a lot. Because otherwise, as I say, readers might really lose track of what you want to say. The most important strategy, actually, when you prepare your manuscript and you want to make it successful, is to create a clear and easy to follow structure to your paper. You have your introduction, and perhaps depending on your research, your methods, theory, or literature review. Then you have your results or the development of your argument, the discussion, again, depending on your research, and the conclusion. But the most important point I would like you to take from all this is that imagine, aren't we all fascinating storytellers? And really what we want to make sure is, of course, to fascinate others with the stories we have to tell. But we want to do that in a consistent and easy to follow way. Okay, so I mentioned paper structure. So I would like actually to spend a few slides on different sections of a journal article. And I will start from the abstract. And again, here I have included a screenshot of my first article. I'm very proud of because I really, really love this film, Zorba the Greek, and the whole spirit of the 60s and the period when this film was released. And here is my advice and some basic tips. It's difficult to write a decent abstract before you actually finish the paper, as the abstract is an overview of the content. It's an overview of what your article is about, right? I could say, make sure you know the parameters for that particular journal you are submitting to. Most journals have, for example, word counts and word limits, and perhaps guidance on format and structure. Again, think about your audience and write this abstract for them. After you have written your first draft, go through and remove any unnecessary words. And I would say focus on the essential information. It's like this, like the abstract needs to go through this process of, you distill, right? You want to cut down all, the extra or impressive words and make sure that it is very, very concise. And if you end up revising your paper after you have written the abstract, make sure again to, go back, review and revise the abstract as well, which I have to admit, sometimes it can be a frustrating exercise because you really, really look forward to submitting your article finally. And then you have to say, oh gosh, I have to go back again and make sure that the abstract reflects my revised article. Sometimes I have to say I read out loud articles and abstracts of what I have written, again to make sure that my sentences are concise and short, and of course the language I have used is not difficult to read. Okay, so here I have included 2 examples of abstracts, of structured, in fact, abstracts that have been published in 2 journal articles on our website. And while the journal you are submitting to might not require you to format your abstract in a specific manner, these examples give you a good sense of the information you should include in an abstract. Again, depending on your research, depending on journal requirements, and so on. I appreciate that these examples are not specific to arts, humanities, and social sciences. I have nevertheless included these here just again to give you an example of a more structured abstract. Perhaps more relevant to us might be this example of a video of a journal abstract. And again, on our website, we give guidance to authors who are not shy, who are ready to present themselves in front of a camera, be interviewed and talk about what their article is about in, let's say, our advice is in maximum 2 minutes. And here you actually have an example of an author who is talking about what her journal article is about. And we have the ability to host these abstracts alongside a journal article on our website. So something for you to consider. Okay, so writing a title, abstract, and keywords then. Again, 3 points apply to all these points. We have to think about our intended audience. We need to revise every time we revise our paper. And again, think about language. Is it difficult to read language? And here on this slide, actually, I have included some tips about writing a successful title, abstract, and keyword, which I wish I had known actually when I was writing my first articles. And it's actually something that my colleagues in marketing told me a couple of years ago, and I keep sharing this information to our journal editors, our authors, researchers like you every time I give a presentation like this. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to carefully select the words that appear in your journal article title, abstract, and keywords. I would say we should add keywords that are accurate descriptors of our article. And we need to think about the search terms potential readers will use to find our article on Google, for example. There is actually a tool that Google offers. It's called Google Trends. And this tool helps you compare keywords and their likely success. So, for example, you can compare terms such as EURAXESS and European crisis. And you can see how many readers Google these terms. And in fact, you can see the period. You can check how many users have used this term in the last 6 months or in the last year and so on. Also, think about Google Scholar, which counts the first 65 characters of your article title for indexing purposes. So our marketer's advice to you would be to ensure that 1 or 2 keywords are featured there. I would also say include keywords and synonyms in your abstract and section headings. Title, again, make it very concise and avoid using phrases such as study of or investigation of. And again, write all this in a precise and concise way. Now you will ask me why I have included this example of an article here. I have to say that this is actually one of my favorite examples of articles that show that the authors have written a very successful article, abstract, and keywords. And of course, I will not refer to the content of the article. So for the purposes of what we're discussing, spend some seconds and look at the title, the abstract, and the keywords of this article. And look also at the date when this article was published. Is there any key takeaway points that you are taking from that? I have helped you here because I have actually highlighted a phrase that we see throughout this section of the article. It is Black Lives Matter. The article is about Black Lives Matter. It was published back in 2017 when the movement was really live. Everyone was talking about it. There were many people out in the streets in support of this movement. And this was the time when this article came out. The authors, however, have chosen to use the hashtag in front of the phrase Black Lives Matter, which means what? Which means that users who were actually using the hashtag on Twitter would find actually this article, because around that time, the authors, us, the publisher, and the journal editors, the journal's editorial team kept promoting the article on Twitter. Needless to say, it was among the top cited and top read articles in the journal in 2017 and the year after. So a really successful example. Okay, so moving on to the introduction then, it is especially again important that we create a strong introduction. The introduction lays the groundwork for the entire paper and is often the only part of a paper people read carefully, I have to say. So in terms of peer review, often editors, especially those editing large journals, will carefully read the introduction and then, I have to say, just skim the rest of the article to decide whether the article is a good fit for the journal in terms of content and quality. So really, it's incredibly important that you create that strong and well-structured introduction. Let's say 2 or 3 pages, an introduction that establishes the research question or problem you are exploring, an introduction that provides a clear thesis or argument, which is easy to see and understand, and provides a review of the literature if that is standard in your field. Though sometimes, the literature review has its own section. You should also provide an outline of the structure of your paper, letting readers know what they can expect from your work. Do keep in mind, some journals and disciplines require very clear structures with simple headings for their papers, such as the example here, where they can clearly label the different sections in the paper. So a roadmap would not be as important in those cases. Okay, and finally, feedback, the crucial role of feedback. For a moment, the slide did not follow what I wanted to say, and I had a moment of panic. But anyway, hopefully now you can see the right slide. The crucial role of feedback then. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have as many people as possible to read and comment on your work throughout the writing process. In the past, I have to admit I was really shy and very protective of my research, and I wasn't actually ready to let others read it before sending my work to a journal article, which was really, I think, a stupid thing to do, really, because I had actually a group of colleagues and friends who could have helped me. Although I have to admit that I did attend as many conferences as I could, and I gave presentations. So my work had the exposure to a larger audience there. And of course, conference delegates can give you in some cases, actually, if not all, very useful feedback on your work. Certainly the researchers I work with and I talk to every day, sociologists, I know that they use to a large extent preprint servers. SOC Archive is the preprint server for sociology, although I'm sure there are relevant other servers depending on your research. And of course, at the university, when I was a PhD student, I did attend as many writing groups as I could with my peers. And again, in this way, my work had the exposure there, and I was again open to the thoughts and views and ideas of my colleagues. Because really, ideally, what you want to do is that to ensure that your paper, the paper you submit, is in the best possible shape when you do that. Okay, so the first section of my webinar is over. And now I have included just only a few slides for you with some ethical issues to be aware of. And I really want to stress this as much as I can, because you have no idea, like literally no idea, how many cases related to these type of ethical issues come to my desk every day. From journal editors, from authors who have published articles or who are thinking of submitting their work to one of our journals. So this is actually an introduction to what I do every day, and some tips for you to think of and be mindful of, as I'm sure you are in the process of writing your work right now. First of all, authorship criteria. Who actually qualifies to be listed as an author in an article? And here I have included 5 points, really to show you who an author really is. Is really someone who has made a significant contribution to the work reported, whether that is in the conception or study design, execution, or in various other areas I have listed here. He or she is someone who has drafted or written or substantially revised or critically reviewed the article and has agreed on the journal to which the article will be submitted. And this is actually important because I know cases of co-authors who actually were in disagreement, and actually some authors went ahead and submitted an article to a journal, whereas their co-authors were not happy with this decision, and this is not very ethical. Authors are also those who have reviewed and agreed on all versions of the article from submission to the final version. And actually, they can take responsibility and be accountable for the contents of the article. And they can actually share responsibility to resolve any questions that might be raised regarding the accuracy of the content or the integrity of the content and so on. Although, these are the criteria that makes an author an author, journal articles usually have just one corresponding author. So one author from the list of co-authors, who is actually the one who will sign the author publishing agreement on behalf of all co-authors. And of course, needless to say, all this comes with responsibilities. Okay, so here is perhaps my favorite slide. It actually describes the two top, perhaps, among the top reasons for rejection of a manuscript, or if an article is published, actually they can lead to a retraction of an article. So it means that the publisher, in a collaboration with journal editors, remove the paper from the website, which is not a particularly pleasant experience for us, but also for the relevant authors. So these are the cases of plagiarism and self-plagiarism, or as we say, text recycling. There are some differences there, but essentially is what I say copy-pasting, right? Plagiarism is the appropriation of another person or group's ideas, processes, results, figures, or words without giving credit. And what I mean when I say giving credit, it means that, of course, we are researchers, and sometimes we might need to refer to other researchers' works. But when we do that, we usually say, for example, as Erato Basea states, and then we will use exactly the same words that I have used in a book, let's say, but we will use that within brackets, right? Within quotation marks. And in a parenthesis, we will add the source, so my surname, plus the date when the book was published and the pages where you have found this quotation. So when we say another person's ideas or processes, this can include content from books or articles or even websites and blogs. And I'm saying this to you, that this is like really important, because actually publishers, we have actually the power to detect that if this happens in journal articles by using detection software. And I have at the bottom of this slide, I have given you a screenshot of the instructions for authors of a note that you can find on the website of Ethnic and Racial Studies. which is a note that makes everyone aware that when you submit your manuscript to the journal, you are agreeing to any necessary originality checks that your work may have to undergo during the peer review and production processes. Self-plagiarism or text recycling is something similar but different. It's actually when in an article, let's say, or in a book, we repeatedly use phrases or paragraphs or ideas or figures, data of our own work. And I think to a certain extent, this is normal to do that when, you know, we work in, you know, in a field that, you know, we build upon our own work when we want to progress an argument, or if we want to correct ourselves and what we have written in the past. But again, you know, you have to do that to a certain extent, because really, if you write an article which is based on what you have already written, this can lead to redundant publication and really distorts the scholarly record. And as a matter of fact, all journal articles by you know, quality publishers publish only original research. So the tip I have for you is to cite all relevant sources and previous versions and obtain permissions from reuse. You need to cite appropriate, balanced, and relevant sources. And if any previous full versions of your work exist online, for example, in preprint servers or repositories, make sure that you cite these. And ensure that you have permission from the copyright holder for any images or models from third parties. And for those of you who work in the arts, for example, I'm sure that you're thinking of writing about, for example, paintings that you can find in museums. Make sure that you get permission to include images of these paintings from the copyright holder. In that case, perhaps someone at the museum where these paintings are might advise you on who the copyright holder is. Again, this is something that I didn't know before joining Taylor and Francis, the acknowledgement sections, which is where we say, oh, I would like to thank my supervisor or this person and that person for their help when I was writing the paper and the ideas and so on. Did you know actually that you need to notify and obtain permission from anyone you name within the acknowledgement sections? And this is really for various reasons. You know, by doing so, you give these persons the option not to be named. And I think this is important, especially if you work on, let's say, political science. Some researchers work with social movements, and they would like to thank social movement participants and demonstrators who do not want to be named, especially if they are in countries that, you know, have very weird, let's say, political, there's a political situation that is, you know, weird and so on. Also, the person being acknowledged may actually think that they should be an author instead of just being a name in an acknowledgement section. Just to say, we ask you, if you submit your work to one of our journal articles, to declare when you submit that you have actually obtained the okay from those being named in this section. And finally, perhaps I should, before I open the floor to questions, I will talk about this recently released policy that we have, which I have to say has created like so many questions from authors, from editors, and I really want to demystify this, why we did that. And we are not actually the only publisher who released this policy. So what this policy is about: if your research has to do with people, with human participants, and on the right-hand side of your slide, I have included some examples of research. So for example, if your research involves children, adolescents, vulnerable groups, for example, refugees or anyone who feels powerless to refuse participation in a study, if your study is based on data sets, if you do ethnographic research, if you are an anthropologist doing ethnographic research, if you conduct interviews and your research is based on this interview data, or if you're a historian working with data that is oral histories, or even if your research is on indigenous communities. These are some examples of research that actually falls in this category. And the policy there is the following. We ask authors who actually work on research like that to actually submit articles that include a statement to confirm that ethical approval has been obtained from all protocols from the local institutional review board or other appropriate ethics committee to confirm that their study meets all the guidelines for research on humans. I appreciate that not all countries or regions have a local review board, or even not all universities even across the world. And where this is the case, where ethical approval is not required, or you have not obtained approval before, prior to starting your study, this should be stated in your manuscript. And again, if you have questions or if you are not sure, ask the editor of the journal you are submitting your work to. And this is a sort of like screenshots of what you will see, of the questions you will see when you submit to one of our journals. This is actually questions that I have sort of like screenshot before this presentation. I went to the submission portal of one of the journals I'm responsible for, and then you will see that if you were to submit your work to that journal, you will get questions around ethics declarations. You would be asked if your study includes human research participants, and if you would click yes, then you would be asked to confirm that your manuscripts includes a description of all the necessary ethics approvals, and you could confirm that all the subjects you have interviewed or you have surveyed have provided appropriate informed consent. I'm happy actually to explain this in more detail in the Q&A session, but I just wanted to put that on record. And talking about questions, this is the time for me to stop and open the floor to any questions, thoughts, feedback, ideas you have for me.
Thank you so much, Erato. So far, it's been an excellent presentation, and I really liked, that you really gave a very clear understanding with some very good examples, which also, a person like me could also understand, and it made totally sense to me. And also, what I liked was now, of course, the last part, the ethical part, and also the question of plagiarism and how to address those challenges. So I'm looking into the Q&A, and we are now have the floor open for some minutes of question, and then Rata will also continue with the second part of her presentation. We're getting a lot of thumbs up so far for you.
I can see that.
And applause. Yeah,
thank you so
really
much.
nice.
This is so encouraging.
Yeah. No, very nice. It's always really great to have you with us. First question is from Samir. He's asking how to publish an article in a renowned journal where article processing charges are very high and one doesn't have the funding for that.
Okay, so how to publish an article in a prestigious journal where publishing charges are really high, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think Samir, to reply to your question, I think this would depend on the type of journal you would like to submit to. If the journal is, as we say, hybrid, if it publishes both subscription and open access content, then it is up to you to decide how you would like to publish your article. If you don't have the funding or the support of an open access funder, it's fine for you to submit your article for free. It's just that it will be published on a subscription basis. This is actually a very good question, because it helps me put on record and make sure that I sort of like explain that there are different types of business models that journals follow. There are actually journals that publish only open access content. And in that case, yes, publishing charges would be there for authors or their funders, or the company, if authors work for a company which is willing to cover the article publishing charges. But some journals publish all types of content, both subscription and open access, and there you have no publishing charges if you decide to publish on a subscription basis.
Mm.
But having said that, as I will cover later in my presentation, there are actually some, let's say, bad publishers, if it's okay for me to use this adjective, who actually are not reputable publishers. All what they try to do is to present themselves as a publisher with journals, and all what they try to do is to convince you to publish in their journal, which is not reputable. It doesn't publish peer-reviewed content, and they will ask you to pay. So as I will cover later in my presentation, make sure that the journal you are submitting to is actually a good one, a reputable one, by a publisher who has the reputation as a great publisher in the field.
Great, thank you so much, Rato. Another question is one of our attendees asking, is there a general rule for the order of co-authors? For example, does the last mentioned co-author mean that this person is the project leader or the supervising author?
Okay, I think this is actually fantastic, a really good question. And I think really this depends on the discipline. On the discipline you are in. For example, if you speak to a researcher who is in mathematics, what happens there is that mathematicians list co-authors, all their co-authors in an article in an alphabetical order. And I think this happens in all, if not or most, science, technology, and medicine fields. In arts, humanities, and social science, it's something different. It's the first author might be the one who has done most of the research, probably, most of the writing. Probably he's the one or she's the one who has invited others to contribute to the writing. So in that case, yes, I would say that a co-author is probably the project leader. But for me, if you ask me, the first co-author in this field should be the one who has actually done an extensive contribution to the research the article covers.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Thank you. I hope it also is clear to the person who asked the question. Another question, Rato, is from Dr. Gaurav Shah. He's asking, can we send an article to 2 different journals simultaneously?
Oh, I think this is actually also a great question. And actually, I'm working on a case right now. Actually, we have an author who submitted his work to multiple journals, and this isn't really okay for various reasons. For example, when you submit your work to a journal, at least to a journal we publish, you will be asked the question whether this is original research and whether this is the only journal you are submitting your work to. And only if you click yes this is original research, this is the first and only journal I'm submitting, the editor will consider your work. This is really for various reasons, and think about, for example, journal editors who spend their time trying to find the best peer reviewers for your work, and it's not really fair to them to know that the authors have chosen 2 or in some cases more journals to submit their work simultaneously. It's a waste of time, and if editors find out, and usually they do, usually there are actually the peer reviewers who tell them, well, actually, I was invited to review the same work in another journal recently. It doesn't reflect well on the authors who do that. I don't know if this has replied to your question, but this is my strong recommendation and advice to you.
We take a couple more, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then we will also have another slot of Q&A towards the end of the webinar. We have actually one attendee from the Philippines as well with us, Eugene. Okay. The question is it all right to make a research? The data is based on second sources like books and articles, because in a sense you want to present a research gap. May it also be published if your data is based on second research?
Zamrat, if you can repeat the question, that would be great, because you have broken up for me for a bit. So I lost some of the bits of the question.
Okay. Is it all right to make a research where data is based on secondary sources like books and articles? Because in a sense, you want to present a research gap. May it also be published? Question mark.
Yeah, I don't know if Eugene is referring to what we call literature review. I don't know if Eugene can actually confirm that or not. What happens in literature review is that authors who write this type of content, they just go to previously published sources and they present views already expressed by others there, and this is actually a review of existing literature on a topic. I did actually one when I looked at what other researchers have on film adaptations, on films that are based on novels and the theory of that. I don't know if you're referring to that, but yeah, literature review is actually a piece of writing that some journals publish. But if you're referring to an article that is actually based on on what others have said, let's say, I think again this is fine as long as you have a new and novel contribution to make to existing literature. If you have a new argument that you can offer, that you can make, if you can actually build on what has been said in the past.
Yeah, if it's not clear for her, for Eugene, then maybe we can take it up again towards the end. 2 more questions before we continue. Does Taylor and Francis have APC? If they do they have waivers for authors from developing countries?
Yes. So if you would like to publish on an open access basis in one of our journals, which publish open access articles, there is an article publishing charge. But there are actually various options for authors. It might be that you are based on an institution that has funding, that has an agreement with us. And if your article meets all the criteria, the librarian can actually cover the APC for you. But if not, we do have waivers that we offer to authors who are based in developing countries. And yeah, you can find all this information on our website. You just have to search, Google waivers, Taylor and Francis, and you can find all the relevant information there.
Great. What kind of attention details we need to pay while choosing any reputable or good journal?
Oh, what kind of details? Wow, I can spend the whole day talking about that. Um, let's see if I am to distill this into a short answer. The most important thing, I think, is I would say I would actually read the aims and scope of the journal, which actually is a description of the content the journal publishes, and make sure that your research is relevant, will be relevant to this journal. But this is actually something that we will cover later in the presentation. So I will keep this as a surprise for you.
Okay, so now I think this was a good transition from your side. I think it's time we can continue with the second part of your presentation, and then we will again come back to the questions, which are piling up, by the way.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Yeah, keep firing away to all attendees. And yeah, actually, the last question was paved the way really nicely to the second part of my presentation. And if the person who asked the question has any further thoughts or questions, or if anything was unclear, yeah, just let me know later. Okay, so then, Zamrat, without further ado, I will move on basically to the things to consider for us to consider when choosing a journal. Okay, so choosing a journal that is not a good fit for your work can slow down the publishing process significantly. It means that you will submit your article to a journal and that you will be waiting for something to happen and nothing will happen. And of course, you don't want this detail. You don't want this to happen. So it's important to take this part of the process seriously and be thoughtful about your journal choice. It can be difficult to know where to begin when looking for a potential journal to publish in. And especially, at the beginning of your career, I have to say that for sure. So obviously, the first step is to read a lot, read a lot and get a sense of the published research that is out there and journal options in your particular field. So how you can learn that? How can you expand your knowledge on what is out there? If I were you, I would talk to your network of colleagues, those who know your work well, and ask for journal recommendations. If they have published in those journals, ask them, how was your experience publishing in that journal? Were you happy? Were you satisfied? See if they have any advice to offer about the process. And some colleagues, bear in mind, might be actually biased towards certain journals, but still, again, this is a good source of information. Google Scholar, again, is another good source of information. You can type a topic and search through most recent articles, or even Google, I would say. Of course, university libraries and academic publisher sites is another source. I mentioned earlier as a response to Eugene literature review, so you might wish to review references in your own literature review or reviews that other folks have written. And again, as I mentioned, I would actually read the aims and scope of a journal. And where you can find this statement, you can find it on the journal's website. It's listed in a sort of like drop-down box. It is a short descriptor, one paragraph or two paragraphs about the research that particular journal publishes. And you want to make sure that, if you, for example, let's say have an article on history in the 60s, you submit this work to a journal that actually can publish this type of research. And I'm just use this topic out of the blue, and we do actually publish a journal that is called the 60s. So it's particular for this type of research, as particular as it and relevant as it can get. But we also offer this tool. We launched it last year or a couple of years ago. Don't take my word for it, but it's actually a recent innovation that we have launched on our website. It's called Journal Suggester Tool. You can actually Google it, or you can find it if you type the quite long, I have to admit, link. You can find at the bottom of the slide. And what really you do, you have your abstract you have written of your article, and you just copy and paste it there, and you click the box reveal suggested journals, and then you can find a list of some suggestions. But again, if I were you, I would read again these journals' aims and scope again to make sure that these journals are relevant, 100% relevant to what you have written. Okay, so when choosing a journal, what should I look for? Before I do that, I have actually included here 2 examples of aims and scope text for you, just to give you an example of 2 titles. The first one, actually both titles are 2 sociology journals. The first one is what we call a specialist journal, and the second one, the Sociological Quarterly, which has a very general title, is a generalist journal, a journal that covers broad subject matter across the whole discipline of sociology. So again, if your research focuses on, let's say, water, air, wildlife, fisheries, and so on, you would then submit to the first one. If your sociological work is much broader, you could consider submitting to the generalist journal, Sociological Quarterly. Aims and scope is something that you can find on the website, and also you will find there author guidelines, or what we say instructions for authors. And this is actually the rule book of a journal. It has all sorts of information for potential authors thinking to submit. And it includes things, for example, information on article publishing charges, as some of you asked before. It can give you information on word limits, article types. Bear in mind that not all journals publish all kinds of article types. You can find information on special issues, forthcoming special issues, if you would like to submit your work to one special issue, and information on how to use third-party material in your paper, which is something we covered earlier in that session. So every journal will have this information there. I have to admit that not all authors check this information before submitting, which means that sometimes, for example, their article is too long for the journal. And this comes with disappointment because the editors would have to reject it, will have to send the article back to the author and explain, of course, why they did that. So some of you asked the question about article publishing charges, and I mentioned that not all publishers are trustworthy, and some actually publishers pretend to be proper publishers, and they ask authors to publish but by paying. And I really want to cover this on this slide. And talk and say a few words about fraud and malpractice in publishing. And in recent years, it is a sad fact, we have seen the rise of this type of activity on the part of organizations claiming to provide services to researchers. Many, if not all of you, will be aware of predatory publishers, which represent themselves as legitimate publishers, editors, and journals, but well, they're not. They will inundate your email inboxes with an invitation to publish your articles with them. However, often the journal in question will be outside of your research area. Take a look at the example on the slide. Dear doctor, of course, I have blanked out the specific details. This is actually an email a colleague of mine received. It is from a medicine journal interested in publishing my colleague's research, which focuses on financial economics. So one would assume, well, hold on a minute, why am I receiving this email since it's not relevant to my research? Predatory publishers may have many characteristics in common. Their websites contain incorrect or misleading information. For instance, they will copy established journals' names and website design, but include some small differences, such as a slight difference in the journal title, and which actually will make you suspicious. The editorial board will feature names of well-established researchers who never actually agreed to be on the board. They also promise very fast peer review and publishing times, promising publication within a week, which I tell you, this is like rare or impossible. Crucially, the peer review process often does not happen or it is fabricated. They have confusing or unclear information about publication fees. So essentially, this type of well, supposed to be publishers will ask you to submit to their journals, and I'm using that in brackets, only if you pay, and basically they will get money from you. The other trend we are seeing is predatory services for authors. These entities set up professional-looking websites offering a number of services similar to legitimate publishing service companies such as language editing or scientific editing. They will often also offer to format your paper in the style of the journal you would like to submit to, and then offer to take care of the submission for you. What we have found is the websites again look professional, yes, true, but if we look closer, the language really doesn't make sense. This is an example, such as the example, the text on the example in the lower right-hand corner. And it is true that recently we have been contacted by a number of authors who were told that their papers had been submitted to a journal by one of these services, and they had participated in what they thought was a legitimate peer review process, and they had their paper accepted for publication. However, honestly, we have never seen these papers. It was something like totally new to us, and then we investigated and we found out this information on these predatory services. Needless to say, the editors of the journals we published had never received the papers, never put them through peer review, never accepted them for publication. And the authors, you will ask me, the authors had received fake but official looking communication from what they thought was the editor and our production department. So something for you really to avoid. Okay, so finally, I really want to say a few words about peer review. And when actually I was preparing these slides, I tried to really think about myself, how I was feeling about peer review when I was writing my first work. And I wanted to submit my first article and go through this peer review process for the first time. Because really it was a frustrating experience. I made some mistakes in that process. And now having, a couple of years after that, I really, really want to help you there by explaining what this is all about, the importance of it, but also give you some advice on how to deal with the comments of the editors and the peer reviewers. And I'm happy to elaborate on my experiences later in the Q&A. But first and foremost, what peer review is. This quote from Andrew Preston really captures the importance of peer review. Peer review, well, not only is it quality control, but also a form of collaboration between researchers. And researchers agree that peer review is an essential part of the process. It is where papers are assessed for the different elements we have discussed. So elements, for example, is the article a good fit for the journal? Does it follow the journal guidelines? Is the research novel and making a contribution to the field? Is it sound research? Does the evidence support the findings? is this article really contributing to the body of literature? To actually respond to Eugene's question, is it well written? Does the author really clearly communicate their findings? Are there any ethical issues that we should explore, that we should think about? And really, this process is to add trust and integrity of scholarly communication, and it is a collaboration between experts, between the editor, the peer reviewers, and in fact the author or authors who will actually revise their work accordingly. So here is actually an overview of how peer review works in most cases, because of course there are variations depending on the journal and workflows. Okay, so let's say we are the author now, and we have found the best journal to submit our work to, and we are submitting our manuscript. This work goes through a check to see if everything is in order, if you have followed the journal guidelines, for example, if your article has a title, an abstract, author name, all this kind of stuff. If it is not formatted correctly or missing files or other components, it will be returned to you with instructions to reformat, update, or include more material, which can be really frustrating. So yeah, make sure that you follow these guidelines before actually submitting. It will save you time later. Once the files are in order, the submission is sent to the editor for a quick review. The editor of the journal will decide if the paper should be sent out to peer review. At this stage, it can be rejected if your work is out of scope of journal, if your work is not complete, unreadable, or perhaps not understandable. This is called a desk reject, which I have highlighted here in the first red box. However, if your paper is of interest, the editor will send it out for peer review, usually to 2 or more external reviewers who are specialists in the field. They will read your work and provide a report for the editor with recommendations for a decision. The most common recommendations are revise and resubmit with major revisions or with minor revisions. This means that the reviewers are interested in your work but have some suggestions on how you can make it even better. Your paper can also be rejected at this point. I have starred accept here, in the green box, because it is possible that your paper will be accepted without revisions, although I have to say that this is really, really highly unlikely. I have never seen this happening very often, because really every piece of writing can be improved upon. And even the peer reviewers who are super happy with your work might still have some suggestions to make around some minor tweaks that you might need to do to improve your work. So once you, the author, make the revisions, you will resubmit to the editor, who will either accept your work or send it out again to the reviewers to see if they are happy or if they have any further comments. Now here is the bad news. Your paper can go through this process a couple of times and still be rejected. And I'll tell you how to avoid this in a moment. So let's take a look at what peer review looks like in practice. And here I have the 3 types of peer review you are likely to come across. The first is called single blind, which this is more relevant actually to science, technology, and medicine disciplines, but I still have it here just for the sake of the discussion to make you aware of this category that exists. It's called single blind or single anonymous because really what happens is that the peer reviewers know the identity of you, the author, but authors do not know the identity of reviewers. The second category or type, if you like, the double blind or double anonymous peer review is really, the most common type of peer review you will find in arts, humanities, and social sciences. It means that nobody reveals the identity of the other party. Reviewers don't know who you are, and you do not know who the reviewers are. There is also the case of the third type of review, which is actually open peer review, where all identities are known. Keep in mind there are many varieties of open peer review, from the basic, where everyone's identity is known, to a completely open process where the public can see the submitted version of the article, all the peer reviewers, comments and author comments, and the different versions of your paper. And this is actually a type of review that we follow in our F1000R platform. So make sure to review the instructions for authors before submitting so that you are aware of the type of open peer review the journal conducts, because you might not be you might not want to have your identity revealed, and that's fine. I can see some thumbs up. It seems that you agree, hopefully. um Okay, and this is actually my favorite part, and actually I can spend the whole day talking about this, because actually I had a couple of experiences where I felt that reviewer comments were really harsh to me and my work. Of course, they wanted to help me improve my work, but I have to say that at times I felt really frustrated because one work of mine in particular had to go through various actually rounds of review, and I was like really keen and excited to see it published, and again there was something there, an obstacle that I had to overcome. Okay, so how to respond to the reviewer comments is an important part of the publishing process. You just need to remain calm. At least that was the advice I gave to myself, at least. Because I felt that, at times it can feel like a rejection, especially with revise and resubmit with minor revisions. And I would say that, it's not the end of the world. Don't become upset. In my case, I would close my computer, I would go out, have a couple of drinks and forget about it for a couple of days and then come back. And when I'm ready to get to work, again, I would be in the right state of mind. I would carefully read the decision letter. Perhaps I'm over exaggerating here. It's just that I had just one bad experience, I have to say. But anyway, when you are ready to get to work, I would carefully read the decision letter. It may include advice on how to respond to the reviewer's comments. And really, the reports will provide information also about deadlines for returning your revisions. So actually, I was talking to a friend of mine who is in a different field. He's a mathematician, and he has co-authors. And what he did a couple of days ago, he received the comments of reviewers, which were very positive, and that was great. But they still had comments to make. So my friend set up a meeting with his co-authors in a nice cafe, and they spent a couple of hours reviewing all of the reviewer comments. So he had actually shared the reports with his co-authors prior to the meeting to give them some time to, think. They went through the reviewer reports. They made a list with all their suggestions for improvement, and my friend actually grouped the comments based on category. For example, comments related to literature review or comments related to the introduction or the argument. And he went through the list and decided which recommendations they would like to adapt and make those changes, and which ones they decided not to adapt. And of course, I'm describing an experience that a friend of mine had with his co-authors, but the same really process is the process that, you would normally follow if you are the only author of an article, right? You will actually, read the reports, make a list of the comments, go through the list, decide which recommendations you would like to adapt, and decide which edits you would like to make and which ones you don't want to make. And now here is the key to avoiding the fate of going through the revisions process a couple of times and still being rejected. So sharing my experience here. When you send back your revisions, my advice to you is to include a note to the editor clearly detailing how you have addressed the peer reviewer concerns. Where you have adapted the peer reviewer's recommendations, clearly detail what you have changed and where that changed can be located in the paper. Some journal editors will ask you to use track changes in your Word file so that they can actually see what you have done. And now, and this is actually really, really important, and I cannot actually stress it more and more, that it's really, really important to make a critical, use your critical judgment and make a decision on the points, on the recommendations of the reviewers you do not want to take on board, and why, and explain in this letter to the editor why you have not amended certain recommendations of the peer reviewers. For example, a peer reviewer might think that you should cite another paper, and this can be really common. But you might feel that might be out of scope of your project. This is totally relevant to your work, and there is no need for you to cite a paper that is irrelevant in your research. And it's fine for you to say, well, actually, I haven't done that for X, Z reasons. And it's fine for you not to amend it as long as you explain, so that both the reviewers and the editors understand. And I'm saying this because in the past, I used to follow to make all the changes, all the reviewers will tell me to increase my chances of getting my article published. But as I became actually more confident about my work, I was like, oh, hold on a moment. Actually what they're asking, the things that they are asking me to do are not very relevant in some cases. So I had actually to put my, to actually make sure I make a decision as to the edits I make and the ones I don't make. So once you have detailed how you have addressed each of their comments, review your response to the editor to make sure you have included all the recommendations and actions you have taken and those you have not taken. This can be actually a challenging process, I have to say. So it's really important that you remember to be respectful of the reviewers and the editor who has spent time to work to improve your work, really. And because really, these are basically academics, experienced academics who are trying to help you publish the best of your work. And this is the most important thing for us to think. Okay, so here I have included the top 10 reasons for rejections from my experience, personal experience, and also from my experience working actually at Taylor and Francis. I would say again, I should actually highlight that again. Remember to carefully read the aims and scope of the journal and look at what has been previously published to get a sense of what this journal publishes, because it might be a case that you have sent your work to the wrong journal. It might be actually a case that your journal article is not a true journal article. So it's important that you understand what sort of writing project you are undertaking and research the best platform for your work. Number 3, review and follow the instructions for authors. 4 to 9, again, it's all about, how you write your work. Make sure that, your article is not in poor style, doesn't have any grammatical errors. It makes a contribution to the field. It's properly contextualized. It has a, really strong theoretical framework. And yeah, it's well presented, proofread, and etc. And number 10 is actually something to avoid at all costs. You really don't want to write like something that is libelous, unethical, rude, of course, or lacks objectivity, but I'm sure you know about that. Okie dokie, I think I will actually stop here, Zamrat. And here is my last slide. So yeah. I can see
Wonderful.
the first thumbs up. This is very encouraging.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
I don't think we had so many thumbs ups in as in this webinar with you. So yeah,
That's
great.
great.
No,
I can see a little
no,
heart there. This is fantastic.
yeah, no, wonderful presentation and so clear, and especially also the examples you always give, you know, your personal own examples, your own experience, that makes it, you know, much more, I would say, you know, understandable and more graspable for the audience. And also you sometimes refer to colleagues who have experienced, you know, different processes during their publication experience. So that's also very, very, I think, very nice, you know, to have always this kind of reference points during the presentation. Now we have just a few minutes left, but you know, I think overall you're, you know, it's not stopping. You're getting more and more hearts and thumbs up. So,
oh, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Last time actually I had so many comments on my LinkedIn page with some really nice and positive feedback. So thank you all for that.
Great. So let's just pick up a few questions. I will try to choose those which have a much like a larger, you know, general appeal. Yeah, if one's conference paper is being invited for a special issue in a journal, how much of the content from the conference paper can go into that issue? Like, does one have to rewrite it completely, or?
It's a great question. I think it's totally fine for you to submit your conference paper to a journal, or even to a journal as part of a special issue program. Again, my advice to you is to actually cite your work, say in an introduction or perhaps in a footnote that this is based on the conference paper you gave at that conference in that date and on that date and so on. But again, I think I would say that, you know, if you do that, if you decide to do that, make sure that, you know, you try to respond to the question the guest editors have with a special issue, because sometimes when you give a conference a presentation, it might be in the context of the topic the conference is on, and then the special issue might be on a topic which is similar but not exactly the same. The guest editors might have some research questions that ask all authors to respond to. So again, probably you might need to, you know, revise and rewrite some bits to make it more relevant to this special issue. And don't forget, you know, your work will go through peer review. It will be read by the guest editors and peer reviewers, so I'm sure they would have some comments for you, and as a result of that, you would have to edit it accordingly.
Yeah. A question regarding peer review. Will the same peer reviewers review also the revision, or will that be different people?
Good question. I think this depends on the journal, really. I think broadly speaking, from what I have seen, the editors, it actually depends. I think some editors, or the majority of them, if, for example, the decision you have received is minor revisions, the editors might wish to just be the ones to read your revision, and if they think that you have responded to the reviewer's comments successfully, they will accept it. Some editors, especially in the case of major revisions, they will try to send your work back to the same reviewers. But again, you know, in some cases, these reviewers might be busy, might be off sick, and so on. And although they will try to reach out to the same reviewers, in some cases, I have seen editors inviting a new set of reviewers.
Okay. One more question regarding you were talking about single, double blind, and open peer review. Like, what are the advantages, disadvantages, and is it like related to disciplines, or what is the process here?
Yeah, I think yeah, to a certain extent, this is actually this depends on the discipline. As I say, in science, technology, and medicine, usually there you have single blind. For example, again, some colleagues of mine who work in STM disciplines, have published their work as a preprint. Where one can find their name, and the reviewers actually, they can go to the repository and find the author's name, so they are aware who has written the article. For me, in arts, humanities, and social science, the standard is double blind, so no identities are revealed. And I think this has actually positives, because it might be actually a case that, you are not a well-known author, you're a first-time author, nobody knows you yet still, but you are working on it, like you are working to get your name heard and known. And this actually might influence reviewers who might say, well, this person is not a well-known author, so there are some unconscious bias there at play. And to avoid this unconscious bias, to make sure that everyone reviews the work irrespective of, someone's name or age or career level or gender or whatever, no identities are revealed there. I can see a little heart and a thumbs up. So yes, I can feel that you agree with that.
Very good. And I think with this heart and thumbs up, we come to the end of today's webinar. I think we could go on. I think the audience loves to hear you and interact with you, Rato, but unfortunately, we have crossed the 90 minutes and we have to conclude, and it's Friday afternoon here. It's also, I think, lunchtime for you.
Lunchtime for me, yes.
Yeah, so we don't want to deprive you of your lunch. And we thank you really for an excellent, exciting, and super interesting webinar. And really thank you for all the insights you gave to us. And we will definitely invite you again.
I will certainly come again.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe it will also happen physically at some point. But for now, thank you so much, Rato, and thank you, dear audience, for joining in. We really hope you got some useful information, but I'm very sure, because it keeps on popping up, the hearts and thumbs up.
Yes, that's great. That's great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Happy Friday.
Yes, have a nice Friday and a nice weekend to everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.